Pakistan have completed the highest chase in World Cup history, with centuries from Abdullah Shafique and Mohammad Rizwan trumping hundreds from Kusal Mendis and Sadira Samarawickrama at Hyderabad. Phil, this was the game of the tournament so far, wasn't it?
Yeah, welcome back, listeners and viewers. Me again. Without a doubt, yeah. I was saying about 4 hours ago, but for the listeners and the viewers, about 10 minutes ago, that we haven't yet had a humdinger, and this was the best effort so far. It was actually quite devoid of tension for the last 45 minutes or so, for me anyway, because you can see when a team is beaten, and when Sal Shakil chipped one up to extra cover, and the skipper, I think it was, put it down, and then there was a dolly at long off drops as well, then you knew not only was Sri Lanka going down, but they were going out really of the tournament. It would take a miracle really from here on in for them to even feature in the Final Four. But nonetheless, you look on paper, the best part of 900 runs scored, 700 runs scored. Maths, been a long day. And what, 400s, Ben?
Yeah, 400s.
Most ever?
Yeah. I mean, the only tension towards the end was in Mohammad Rizwan's legs, wasn't it? Which was sort of contracting at a alarming rate. And that drop catch, well, because it was Hemantha, wasn't it, who'd taken a brilliant catch as a subfielder earlier in the game to sort of reignite Sri Lanka's hopes. And Pakistan were in trouble early on, so it was a brilliant partnership. But yeah, by the end, it was kind of a done deal.
I found it quite sad to watch, really, for them, because they played brilliantly for the first 40% of the game, but it's just not been their month, has it? To lose Hasaranga and then to lose Chumara as well. They're light on the bowling side at the best of times, and so those two were their gun players really, and to lose both of them, it was always going to be a massive ask for them to really have much of an effect in this tournament, and then to stick 3-4-4 on the board and give it up with 10 balls to go. Yeah, there are defeats, and then there are defeats, and that one is going to be. It's the end of their tournament, let's be honest. It's essentially the end of their tournament, barring something extraordinary from here on in, which is a great shame because they're always so watchable. And there was great flair with the bat, as you come to expect, but they're just lacking discipline with the ball and a little bit of class, really. And they've got a number of bowlers that haven't really proved themselves yet at this top level. And so yeah, it's a sad story, really, for Sri Lanka, who would have been feeling pretty good about life in the latter stages of the Asia Cup a month or so ago.
Yeah,
but it's just not gone their way since then. But Pakistan probably needed to win this one going into the big one on Saturday. So while it's a blow for the prestige of the tournament moving into the final weeks, the more teams that have something on it, the better. From Pakistan's perspective, and everybody is of course, every neutral is hoping that they stick in there and hang tough through to the last four if possible. It's a big deal for them going into, as I say, that monster game on Saturday.
Yeah, I guess it's. Sri Lanka have conceded the World Cup record total in their first game, and then a World Cup record chase in their second game. And I think I think a lot of those players are talented. Like Pastrana, I think, is a really talented bowler. It's just come a few years too soon for him, for Walalage, for a couple of others, and I guess that's what we kind of saw today. Let's talk about some of the good, bit more positive stuff. As you said, 400, which is the most ever in a World Cup game. Only two other men's ODIs have had 400s. Which was your favourite?
Well, Kusal Mendis, for sure. Let's have a look. 122 from 77 balls. Took him 4 minutes over 2 hours for 122. He stuck 6 of them over the rope, 14 of them along the floor, and still falls on the winning side, on the losing side. And that is the Mendis story in microcosm. I've said to you before, I think he's one of the unluckiest cricketers out there because it was his fate to be coming into a setup that had lost the real big beasts, the obvious names, and he became the great hope for Sri Lankan batting before he was ready to fulfill that role. And that tag was put on his back because he's absolutely brilliant. Naturally, he has immense amounts of talent. You remember he announced himself in Test cricket, 170 odd against Australia.
Yeah, when they've been bowled up for 100 in the first innings.
That's it.
They go on to win that Test and then win the series 3-0. Yeah.
Now I'm going to bring up when it was.
2016, I believe.
It was 26 exactly. It was 2016. Yeah, and he'd have been 20 odd years old, and I think it's been a bit of an albatross around his neck ever since. Really, that the best of the new breed as they try and transition from the Sangakkara Jayawardene era into something else. And I remember somebody did an interview with him for our magazine a few years ago, and he said he wants to be the best player in the world. And he said it was such sort of wide-eyed naivety. And he was full of the joys with limitless options, limitless optimism for his career. And what the game has done is chip away at him. He's been dropped from all Sri Lankan teams at various points. He's come into certain big tournaments cold and it's not worked for him. He came into this one in really good form, right? He played really well for the couple of months building up to it, and he's in there at 3.
He played a scorcher against Sri Lanka, against South Africa as well.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. Yeah, so he played really, really well in the build-up, and he's played as well as he possibly can here, and yet, in the end, in the final analysis, he's going to have to drag the team onto the bus, and the post-mortem begins. It's a reflection of his story really in this setup, and they're a very plucky team. They're doing good stuff in the Test arena as well, but they've just been found wanting here through no fault of obviously the top 4 that are doing okay, but that bowling side is raw, and it lacks a sort of focal point. That's the real loss of Hasaranga, who's 50 over record is okay, but his 20 over record is absolutely outstanding, and they could have hung a bowling attack around him because he could have offered control and incisiveness in the middle overs. As it is, they were just lining up to get deposited when Pakistan did come out to bat.
Yeah, and to make matters worse for Mendis, he was actually hospitalised with cramp after the end of that innings, which like at first I was like, that's a bit funny because whenever anyone gets cramp, you think that's quite funny. But actually, the only thing that's funny about cramp is the fact it's going to end soon because it is really painful. So if you have cramp that doesn't end, it must be absolutely awful.
Yeah, it's normally a 10-minute thing, right? Tops.
Yeah,
tops of that. Yeah, the poor fella's been hauled up in hospital, but it was a theme throughout the game, and so obviously you've got to come to Mo Rizwan's knock, which, in the context of Pakistan's competition, right, is a really, really important innings because they didn't convince us at all in the first game. And then you give up 3-4-4. Your seamers don't really deliver, and we've got to come to that, I think. And then to lose 2 quickly. So what were they? 37 for 2 with Babar Azam gone.
37 for 2 chasing 350. That game, you just think that's done, basically.
Yeah. And Mo Rizwan, on one leg for part of it, finishes up 131 not out. Huge moment really in Pakistan's competition. And also I think it's probably worth pointing out they came into this game, and I'm sure there will be a kind of a force field around the team and they'll block out the external noise, but the fact that there's clear diplomatic issues, to say the least, between the PCB and the BCCI. The PCB released a statement earlier in the piece confronting the BCCI for their alleged perceived failure to allow visas for fans and journalists to get into the country, let alone into the grounds. Almost unprecedented, really, for the PCB to make such a statement mid-tournament. So there's a lot of stuff going on around them, and so to have calmed it all down and made those runs, and then to have steered them across the line, a serious knock, really. And look, if you are looking for a moment of the game,
that was mine. Yeah,
you have to go to it, right? Go on.
So it's just basically, he comes out and hits a 6, and then just a beautiful 6 over extra cover, and then immediately collapses with cramp. And actually, it was collapsing in cramp. It was also the way his leg shot out, as if he'd been had a jolt of electricity put through him or something. It was like a proper like a starfish kind of thing with that one leg. And then he was struggling with cramp all the way through. There was one moment where it was quite fun sort of watching him bat, but it was more fun watching after every shot he'd just be punching his thigh loads, and that's just a fun thing. A fun thing to see.
They say it's one of cricket's cliches, obviously. Beware the one-legged cricketer.
Yeah,
and it goes back to Greenwich and all the rest of it. But I think there is something in it psychologically. I think it can simultaneously focus the mind and also sort of free you up a little bit. Because if you're compiling a big innings, then there are going to be moments where you drift away from it. And there's going to be moments when you're not quite as locked into it as other times. If you are carrying an injury, then it has a peculiarly sort of energizing, emboldening effect on you psychologically. And there's a reason why it's a cliche, because it has grains of truth in it. And you saw that with Rizwan today as he was approaching the 100 and battling the cramp. He got over the line and then played really, really sensibly after that. It was almost like it had the effect of sharpening the senses. And as I say, it was a bit of a procession really towards the end. 10 balls to spare when you're chasing 3, 4, 5. That's a serious run chase, and held together by Shafique, right? Playing his first game.
Well, yeah, I was going to say we should also mention Sadira Samarawickrama, who's made his first World Cup 100 as well. But yeah, I think I'd agree with you that the Mendis one was the pick of the 100 just from an aesthetic and probably a quality point of view. But I think that Shafique 100 is probably the most significant because Pakistan made a big and a pretty decisive call to leave out Fakhar Zaman. Is a great for them in ODI cricket. Had an amazing start this year and then struggled, but you think he was going to get a bit of time at least. But no, one game, one failure, and that's it. He's gone. And Shafique doesn't have a huge white ball record. He's done a bit of stuff in T20 cricket, but nothing in List A cricket, nothing internationally for Pakistan. In white ball cricket, he's got a brilliant early test record. And so to play like this kind of makes that top order look formidable again. And so actually, from there, having been a few questions about them, and there are still a few around, I guess, Imam, who's in a bit of a trough, but you've got Abdullah, who looks really good. You've obviously got Babar. Rizwan is in the form of his life in ODI cricket, really. Saud Shakil actually looks like a really quality number 5. That top 5 actually looks more settled than it has done for a little while, even though they've just axed one of their big players. I think that is quite important.
Shafique's 24. He's already made serious opening bat test match hundreds where he's batted for session after session. He made good runs against Australia. Played well against England in parts. But he's clearly the full package, right? Because the clarity of shot in this innings was fabulous. Clearly can absorb pressure. That's no concern of his either. But he played all round the wicket, hit three sixes, 10 fours, comfortably ahead of a runner ball. 103 balls for his 113. Never really looked in any trouble. Yeah. And yet you would think, this was his trial, right? This was his audition. And yet he played like he'd been doing it for 10 years. You can tell a class player when you see one, and he is one of them. There is always, with any team across a tournament this sort of length, there's always different incarnations that it goes through. It's very rare to have, say, what England did last time out when you essentially win it with 12 players. Very rare that happens.
And even then they made a change partway through with Plunkett coming in for Moeen Ali, didn't they?
Yeah. So I was surprised that they dropped Zaman because his record over the last 4 years is really good, but his recent record isn't. And it's those kinds of decisions that you need to make, I suppose, when you're in the real stuff. And this is the business end now, and so it's a brave call. It's probably the right one. Imam ul-Haq's a really good player. He's had a quiet couple of games here, but he's a good player. There's no concerns there. I would imagine that the concern, if there is one at the moment, and Pakistan, they're 2-0, so they're going okay, is with the bowling attack. Now, we assumed the conventional wisdom was if Pakistan are going to go far in this, then they'll be spearheaded by their 3 really good quicks. Now, then Nazim Shah falls away. So they've only got 2, with Hassan Ali, who's a very useful backup. But as of now, Shaheen and Haris Rauf, they haven't quite clicked, have they?
I think Haris Rauf, it's tricky. I think he bowled well in the first game, actually, and took good middle overs wickets, and the kind of middle overs wickets that you can see being really useful against good teams when those wickets between overs 15 and 30 are just absolute gold dust. And even in this game, I mean, 2 for 64 in a high-scoring game, and he's okay. One of them was last ball of the innings. I think he's all right, but Shaheen is the real warrior. I think basically.
So it's a peculiar one, and it might just be just very much a short-term thing.
Yeah, but I guess also he hasn't quite looked exactly the same bowler since he came back from that injury. Really, like I think if you go through he's got decent numbers this year, but if you actually go through those spells, he's not having quite the same incisiveness with the new ball as you'd assume that Shaheen would have, at least in ODI cricket. He didn't have a great PSL. So I think there is a bit of a concern there. He didn't bowl out today, was the most expensive of their bowlers. So yeah, that is a concern. And obviously you're not dropping Shaheen. It's just that you need him to have a good World Cup. Pakistan are going to have a good World Cup.
Yeah. I guess though with a bowler like him, you fall into the trap of just assuming that everything's going to work all the time because technically he's so good and he has such a good record. But perhaps this isn't going to be his role in this tournament. Perhaps he will be a shock and awe bowler on certain occasions. And I mean, what a time to announce yourself on Saturday if it were to play out, against India. For the kind of egalitarian side of the tournament, it's a shame on Sri Lanka. But for the build up to the game on Saturday, which your mind keeps wandering to, because it's just obscenely big game, an obscenely big ground, with an obscenely big build up, as referenced earlier as well, diplomatic rows and all the rest of it. I can see Shaheen still doing something very special. By no means are we saying that he's short by any means. This is Pakistan, and they've had two relatively easy fixtures up to now. The tougher ones come, but they'll be really mightily pleased that they've got them both under their belt because they haven't played consistently well across these two games yet. But in the past, they wouldn't have played well, and then they'd have come up short somewhere. It bodes well that they can play in and out erratic cricket and get these two results.
Yeah, and India's build up to that game continues tomorrow. They play Afghanistan in Delhi. I guess they'll be without Shubman Gill, whose dengue seems to have maybe worsened a bit. He was in hospital early this week, but I guess even without him, India should have too much for Afghanistan, you'd imagine. But they had that top order slide against Australia, so they would at least want tie in the middle for the likes of Rohit Sharma, Ishan Kishan, Shreyas Iyer, I suppose.
Yeah, tomorrow's probably not the game for Afghanistan to make their mark. Avoiding a miserable defeat, a heavy defeat, would be quietly their first port of call. But we do run the risk a little bit with Netherlands 0-2, Sri Lanka 0-2, and Afghanistan probably going to be 0-2 almost certainly after tomorrow's game. We do run the risk of already contracting this 10-team tournament into a 7-team tournament. And Bangladesh, who played very well initially, but got hit hard really by England, they could easily fall into that dustbin, if you like, without sounding harsh, but you know what I mean. And then it could be a 6-team tournament for 3 weeks to whittle down to 4, and that could be quite a long haul. I feel
it could be. Yeah, I guess. I mean, I do agree. Obviously, that India had obviously heavy favourites tomorrow. They did come pretty close to beating them in 2019, didn't they? It was I think a Mohammad Shami hat trick right at the end that sort of finally wrested that game away. And I suppose it's tricky to work out what you want from this World Cup, because it would be great if it was a proper 10-team brawl, all teams taking stuff off each other, someone squeezes in with 5 wins or something. But equally, I think that was always unlikely. So actually, if that 6-team battle can be really, really tight, and then towards the end, you've got the bottom 4 who are still struggling, but are able to take games off those teams. I don't think we've seen anything to suggest that the likes of Afghanistan, Netherlands, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh won't beat any of those 6 teams. I think they will have their say in how the tournament pans out, even if it's not for their own semi-final thing.
Yeah, and you're probably right on that. Netherlands have certainly not disgraced themselves at all. They played some good cricket. They've played some very good cricket in patches in the 2 games. The nature of Sri Lanka's defeat today felt quite heavy, though, quite terminal, really. not just for their chances, but certainly for their morale, their self-esteem. And I'm not predicting this, but you can see a way that those two teams can be marooned if we're not careful here. And so then it does become a contracted story. That said, if that's the way of it, then so be it. If there are 6 almost interchangeable teams, if you can make a case for all 6 of the big dogs, not just getting to the final 2, and you can toss a coin really between any number of them. There's only really India that are clearly playing a different level at the moment, a precarious one though.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the way of it, then so be it. As you say, it would be good to have a 10-team brawl, but that's not the way things work. I just hope there aren't too many dead games in the final analysis, and that these plucky teams, Sri Lanka in particular, can rouse themselves towards the back end. They're not going to finish in the top 4, but they're a proud nation, and they've got some match winners as well. So it would be good to see the thing retain its energy as we head down the pipe. We're only a week in, 5 days in, Ben.
Yeah,
5 days.
It'd be good to see Phil retain his energy as well. And that's,
look, mate, I'm indomitable. Don't worry about that. Let's go to the pub.
Well, yeah, Phil will be back tomorrow. That's all from us today. But God. We've got a bumper weekly episode tomorrow where we'll be looking back over the whole first week of the tournament, a couple of other things from the wider world of cricket. So make sure you tune in then.